Welcome to the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. I am Albert Apache, and as usual, it is brought to you by Open Source Self-Defense, Fitness, and Grappling. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So, what I wanted to start off with today, we like to talk shop before we get into some of the funner topics. So, I really wanted to talk about one of the most really prevalent myths that is pushed in women's self-defense today. And the reason why it's pushed is because it makes for good sales. And that idea is the stranger in the bushes, or the masked guy in the alleyway, or the stalker that breaks in at night. Okay, basically the scary stranger narrative. Okay, this narrative is sold to women across this country through the self-defense industry. And if we're going to become a legitimate industry, like a real service industry, if martial artists are going to become mainstream, right? This is one of the things we really have to stop doing as an industry, because it's just disingenuous. The reality is that by far, somewhere between 70 and 80% of all attacks on females, all assaults, are committed by somebody that the victim knew. And when I say somebody that the victim knew, I'm not talking about their mailman that then stalked them and climbed in through their bedroom window at night. Okay, what I mean is somebody that they're familiar with, somebody that is an acquaintance, or even considered to be a friend, or maybe even a romantic interest, somebody that they're dating. That's what the overwhelming statistics tell us. Somewhere between 70 and 80% of assaults are committed by somebody that the victim knew. Now, why do we continuously sell the scary bad guy narrative? Well, that's easy, because it sells, slots in our seminars, and it sells slots to our classes. And this is why I think it's something that really has to be addressed by upstanding, reputable self-defense, industry people. That's not who you're going to most likely have to defend yourself against. And here's the other reason why they like to sell it. Because all of the reality Rondas and tactical Toms, the ones that run around and knee them in the groin and then smash the groin and grab their eyeballs and elbow them and stomp them and then you finish the fight. Right? That's their whole narrative, and they're quote unquote reality based, or they're tactical based, or whatever the case may be. That's because it's very easy for you to visualize, the big, ugly, snarling bad guy that's a stranger, and smashing that particular person's face. It's really easy for you to give yourself that imagery, right? It's a lot harder when they tell you, yeah, the guy that is kind of nice to you, that, has, 4 or 5 times helped you with your groceries, and he lives in your apartment complex, and he might even be a decent looking guy, and he seems a little bit shy, and but he always helps you carry your groceries. And the first time he helped you just carry your groceries, to the steps, and then the next time he brought them all the way to your door, and then this last time he kind of walked in and he lingered for a moment. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, that kind of nice guy, that's the guy who you're going to have to smush his face, okay? Because visually, on a certain level, okay, it's hard for you to visualize that. It's hard for you to put somebody in that that you think you've built some kind of trust for, put them into that scenario. And understandably so, because we, right, people, we don't want to feel as if we're naive, right? And our lie detector skills are horrible and that we are a bad judge of character. Okay, we don't want to believe that. And this is also where, psychologically speaking, self-blame, when it comes for the victims comes into play here. But anyway, I digress. We don't want to believe that we're a bad judge of character, right? So it's hard for us to put ourselves in that mindset when it comes to somebody that we know. And it's not as, glamorous. It's not as explosive, to sell the fact that most likely, this person's going to already have broken the touch barrier. Most likely, this person has already entered your personal bubble and you've already allowed it because you thought you could trust that person. And so you allow them into your trust bubble. Maybe even you're sitting on the couch. Maybe even you're lying on the floor with them. Maybe you're already into a, kissing session and they want to push the issue further than what you're comfortable with. Or maybe they've reached up and they've started to rub your shoulders and you think it's a friendly gesture, and the next thing you know, their hands want to wander and they get aggressive about it, right? And then all of a sudden, what kind of exchange is that? That's no longer a turning elbow striking exchange, right? Because there's a certain level within you that thinks that, no, I thought I could trust this person. It must be me sending the wrong signal. And, I just need to say no with enough authority and then it'll stop. And so then you get in that trap. And by the time, you've fallen psychologically into this trap of like, no, I'll just keep saying no forcefully. Next thing you know, they're grabbing you a little tighter. Now they're forcing themselves on. Now you're into a grappling exchange. Now you're already on the floor. Now you're already being taken down. Okay. So, they love to sell you on all of this idea of be aware of your surroundings and smash this and smash that, because it's explosive, it's sensational, it's sexy, right? Because it's tough. But the reality is that most of the time you are aware of your surroundings. You knowingly let this person into your area because you thought you could trust them. And that's not your fault. It's just that this person is a predator and this is what they do, right? They gain trust, they try to blend in, and then they, exploit that trust. And so, this is why I really push that, the ground and grappling is a very important and probably the most important part of learning self-defense, because you need to understand how to break out of somebody's grips when they have a control of you and they're clenching on you, whether you're standing or whether you're on the ground. You need to understand how to move your body in such a way that you're using your energy efficiently and also getting away from that person, right? Because the last thing you want to do is exhaust underneath them. And even as much as I really like what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu has done and Gracie Academy has done, even in the Women Empowered, you see that they teach a lot. The core of their system, the top, I don't know, maybe 8 techniques of their core 10 techniques are all standing up techniques, and they use the scenario of somebody approaching you and the big scary guy. So everybody uses the scary stranger narrative to sell self-defense. But the reality is that's not really who you have to worry about. And so you shouldn't be, allotting a bulk of your time for the minority of attackers. You should be, or scenarios, you should be spending the bulk of your time for what the majority of scenarios will be. And so that's a red pill moment when it comes to self-defense for you all. I say things sometimes and somebody out there is probably not going to like them because this is probably how they're trying to sell you on self-defense. You know what? Here's the thing. I don't know how long you've been promising to learn self-defense and you keep saying you don't have the time. Guess what? You're not going to get attacked tomorrow. But you don't know if it's going to be 5 years from now, or if it's 3 days from now, or if it's 6 weeks from now. You don't know. But just like everything else that you should be doing for yourself, You need to start learning now. Okay, guys, here it is. Red pill alert. We're moving on to another topic, and it's a red pill alert. Contrarian thinking here. I know this is going to go against the grain of what a lot of people think of this particular head coach in the NFL and whether or not he is a good head coach. And that head coach is Jason Garrett. So here's my take on Jason Garrett. I think Jason Garrett is one of the most underrated coaches in the NFL today. And I'm going to explain how I've come to this particular opinion. So I used to be of the opinion that Jason Garrett was a so-so head coach, so-so offensive mind, not great, not spectacular, but not horrible. I thought he was, average type of coach when it came to offense. And I felt like Tony Romo covered up a lot of his inadequacies as a coach. But this season has changed my mind. Now, a lot of people might look at the record and go, how could this season change your mind? They have a losing record at this point. And this is how it's changed my mind. What we've been hearing from all of the talking heads about the Dallas Cowboy wide receivers is that they are a subpar group of wide receivers. I've heard Shannon Sharpe refer to these wide receivers as number 3s and number 4s, that you don't have a number 2. You don't even have number 2s on the squad. That's what Shannon Sharpe's been saying. So, then you have an okay defense, right? Defense is okay. Not spectacular, but it's okay. You have a okay special teams. Not spectacular, but okay. You only have really one spectacular offensive weapon, and that would be Ezekiel Elliott. To this point, you would have to say that Dak Prescott has been a disappointment this year. You would have to give Dak probably if you were giving him a letter grade, a D. I mean, just look at his numbers. He's coming in towards the bottom of all active starters right now in ranking, whether you rank via yards, touchdowns, whether you rank by quarterback rating. Dak has not performed this year. And so you have a D-rated quarterback. You have a subpar core of wide receivers. Yet somehow Jason Garrett and this offensive coaching staff have found a way to manufacture points. So see, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and tell me on one hand Jason Garrett is completely inept. On the other hand, also tell me, well, you have a crappy quarterback and you have crappy wide receivers, yet somehow you're generating points and still winning games. What that tells me is that Jason Garrett and this offensive coordinating staff have found a way to generate points with a subpar set of wide receivers and, to this point, a subpar quarterback. Further evidence to me that Jason Garrett is an underrated coach is his immense level of humbleness. He doesn't come with a lot of pride. And, everybody knows when it comes to the personnel decisions that the Joneses have all of the say. Most likely, I'm going to say the primary reins director there, the guy that's really steering the horse, if you will, is probably Jerry Jones, right? For a while, we thought maybe the Suns had stepped up and they were taking over a little bit more of the personnel decisions. But right now, with what's going on, it has to be Jerry Jones. And Jerry Jones very prominently displays this, and it gives Jason Garrett a it diminishes him in the eyes of other people looking in on the organization. But in all reality, the difference between Jerry Jones and his relationship with Jason Garrett is that if everybody's actually upfront about it, right? That the owner is actually having strategical input into the game planning, into the personnel, things of that nature. And a lot of other owners don't live up to that. They're in fact influencing what is going on the field, but they don't come right out and own it. And so this is one of the reasons why I think Jason Garrett is an extremely underrated coach. Let's take a moment. This is a clip from Eric Mangini speaking on ownership. Specifically, he's first addressing Jerry Jones. This is from The Herd.
Well, here's how I feel about Jerry Jones. The whole world knows that he's involved. So he doesn't hide it. People know that he's making decisions. He's the de facto GM. So people can look at things that happen there and realize that he controls it, and everybody can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But a lot of owners are heavily involved in decisions that are being made, whether it's the draft, free agency, who to play, who not to play, but they don't ever take accountability for it. They aren't out in front of it, and you've got to go to the podium and say, this is the best decision I have decided that this is the best decision for our organization, even though fundamentally you don't believe in it. And then if it goes wrong, it's not like the owner steps up and says, hey, that's on me. My bad, don't worry about it. I had a situation one time where an owner said that we needed to throw the ball more, and we were playing a team that was ranked 30th against the run. And so we threw the ball, and it got picked off once for a touchdown. We got strip sacked for a touchdown, and we came out and we won the game. And on Monday, I had a call from the GM and says, well, why didn't you run the ball more? And I'm like, you were in that meeting. What are you talking about? You were in the meeting where the owner said we wanted to throw the ball more, and I said to both of you, so let me get this straight. This weekend, in this game, you want to throw the ball a significant amount of time. Yes, I do. So don't come back on Monday and say, why didn't you run the ball? They're 30th in run defense.
So there you have it, guys. I mean, pretty much an NFL coach telling you what really goes on behind the scenes when it comes to an NFL owner and having input on what goes on the field. So now I would like to take a look at Dak Prescott and his performance in his rookie year. You can see the different depths of attempts there, 1 through 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 30, and 31 plus yard attempts. His highest numbers are at the 1 through 20, right? 1 through 10 and 11 through 20. But his highest percentage is actually at the 21 to 30 yard depth. Everything else is pretty respectable there. Now, as we start to come towards the end of the chart, you're going to see that he has his highest QBR at that 11 to 20 yard depth, a 110.5 QBR. Everything else is respectable there. Now, what we're going to see is a major drop off here in 2017, just last year, his sophomore season. So now, as we look at the 2017 season, what we see is there's not a huge drop off in attempts and percentage rate, but there is some drop off there. But we also see that he still really likes that 1 through 10 and 11 through 20 depth in passing. Where the drop off does occur, okay, where it is concerning is when we look at the quarterback rating. His quarterback rating dropped significantly. Many places where he had 90s and 100s, they're dropping down into the 80s. This is really, really troublesome. But what becomes apparent is that his quarterback rating is still favoring that 11 to 20 yard depth on passing. But the biggest concern isn't that he's favoring that 11 to 20 yard depth. It's that he had a significant drop off at the 30 plus passer rating. He went from somewhere in the 90s down to a 69.7 QBR at balls that are deeper than 30 yards. So clearly we can see that Dak does not like throwing the deep ball. Finally, we're into this current year of 2018 and this season. You can see that Dak has super heavily started to favor that 11 to 20 yard depth in his passing, and it's a clear difference. Look at the percentage. He's at a 72% completion rate, where he has the next highest is a 58 at the 1 through 10. So it's not just depth that he's struggling with. That seems to suggest he's also struggling with accuracy and touch on the ball. Further, we look at the QBR. Look at the ridiculously high QBR at the 11 to 20 yard ball, 107. And we see again at that 30 plus yard ball, it drops again significantly from last season at 69 down to 24.1 this season. The other ratings are in the 80s. This just is not a good look for Dak Prescott. And so when you take all of these QBR numbers and you see what they're doing, basically they have turned into a form of a college spread offense. Basically, they're going to dink and dunk short till they can hopefully throw one or two balls deep. And then they're going to try and confuse you with a lot of motion, spreading out your defense and trying to create holes on cutback runs, on read option plays for their quarterback to run and for their running back Ezekiel Elliott. So the Cowboys are averaging 20 points a game. That means that Jason Garrett and this offensive coordination staff have found a way with an extremely subpar quarterback. We've basically seen they're using a college offense. They're using a college quarterback with very mediocre wide receivers to generate 20 points a game. I think that Jason Garrett, right now, today, with everything he puts up with from the ownership, having such a big say in the personnel, having such a big say in what the game plan is going to look like, with the subpar wide receiver, the subpar quarterback that he has, I think Jason Garrett's doing a better job than other NFL coaches could be doing right now. And that's why I think he's the most underrated NFL head coach. And that brings us to UFC 230, DC versus Derek Lewis for the heavyweight title. Now, I'm not going to do a whole lot of fight analysis here, but I wanted to talk about this fight card and how clearly the UFC and Dana White plays favorites with their fighters. DC has failed to draw more than 300 pay-per-view buys other than when he's fought Stipe or John Jones. So what the UFC tried to do in their attempt to play favorites was to build this card up into a massive, very fan-oriented card. A card in which most fans would want to tune in by basically having Rockhold and Weidman help carry DC. Now, Rockhold and Weidman 2 would have been a very interesting fight, and you would have gotten a lot of hardcore fans tuning in to watch that fight. They would have tuned in to watch that fight because a lot of fans feel as though Rockhold, I'm not going to say got lucky, but that Weidman got frustrated, left his game plan, and Rockhold capitalized on that. A lot of fans see the way that Rockhold has been basically manhandled and punched in the jaw with the same straight right hand over and over and over since Bisping knocked him out, and he doesn't seem to fix the problem. So with the wrestling of Chris Weidman and the jiu-jitsu, as well as the idea of, well, the blueprint has now been laid for Rockhold, I think a lot of fans would have wanted to tune in and see that. The next fight that they tried to build DC on top of, basically give DC somebody else's money. was the Dustin Poirier Nate Diaz fight. That was a huge fight and super fan friendly. A fight that a lot of fans would have tuned in to watch. And I think it just goes to show the favoritism in the UFC. A lot of the criticisms of Demetrius Johnson really have never been that his fights aren't exciting, that he doesn't finish. It's always been that he's not a draw. However, if you look at the cards that Demetrius Johnson has headlined, they've never given him any kind of help. No kind of help like this. I mean, if you would have given Demetrius Johnson the main event with Rockhold Weidman 2 underneath him as a co-main, or even a Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz as a co-main, you can't tell me that pay-per-view card would not have sold. It would have sold, and it would have sold out crazy. You were getting 3 amazing fights. In this case, this particular fight with DC, they know it's a snoozer. They know that nobody really was calling to watch this fight. But in true UFC fashion, trying to cherry pick fighters for their particular guys, whoever they are that they seem to favor, they went out of their way to give somebody that's tailor-made for DC's strengths. Derek Lewis is tailor-made for DC's strengths. Now, we all know that, Derek Lewis, he has a lot of power, and there's a chance that the Black Beast catches DC with a right overhand. However, that being said, those chances are very slim, extremely slim, especially given the style that DC fights, which is he's a above average boxer that uses his boxing simply to close the distance in order to get a hold of you, to tie you up in the clinch, take you down, and then grind you out. And that's what DC is. He's a grinder, and he's always said he's a grinder. So this is, not an interesting fight at all. And then the UFC turned around and they tried to build a card that would get DC paid. Why would they do this? Why would they do this when DC has not done for the UFC what other fighters have done? He doesn't have, I'm not saying that he's a bad fighter, and I'm not saying that he doesn't have the accomplishments, okay? What I'm saying is, for instance, I'm not the hugest Tyron Woodley fan, right? I think Woodley does himself some disservice. I think by focusing on things that have nothing to do with it, he does himself a disservice. He needs to work on his marketing. All that being said, DC has not done or beaten the same level of guys, okay, at the heavyweight level that Tyron Woodley has in his weight class, right? In the welterweight class. Yet they're trying to throw a money card together for DC to get DC paid. Now, the new card looks like, they still got Weidman on the card facing Jacare. Again, I think this fight is a few years too late. However, that being said, it still should be an interesting fight. But if I'm going to be honest, at this point, if this is what the UFC is going to do, unless there's some kind of backroom deals that we don't know about, where Derek Lewis is going to pull out, at the last second, and they're going to stick in Stipe, or they're going to stick in Brock Lesnar or something like that. Other than that, at this point, the way that this card is structured, they might as well just move it to FS1, the entire card. Actually, at this point, having lost the Dustin Poirier Nate Diaz fight, having lost the Rockhold Weidman 2 whole narrative, they really probably could even put this on Fox. That's how uninteresting this fight is right now. It is completely uninteresting. This fight card, I don't know how they're going to sell it. You're going to have an amazing performance on the FS1 prelims from all of the fighters to get people to maybe at the last minute go ahead and buy the main card. But even at that, I just don't think that the main event is really not a main event. It doesn't have any business being a main event. It could maybe be a co-main event, right? But this fight has no business being a main event. And it just goes to show how the UFC and Dana White like to play favorites with whatever fighters and get those particular fighters paid. Now, I've been saying for a long time, and I hope this isn't the case, but I've been saying for a long time that I have an inkling with the whole way that the UFC was bought out, that something was put into the contracts with Dana White where he's able now to do some promotion on a private side with individual fighters, because that's the only thing that logically explains why you would favor specific fighters, and especially specific fighters that haven't traditionally been pay-per-view draws. But that's all I got for now, guys. Remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose. This has been the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. I hope you liked the show. Catch y'all later.